All right, so gotta let it
Mhm.
breathe and bring the Facebook groups in real quick. See if we can't get green check marks all across the board. And see, still spinning. We're good to go.
And we are good. Welcome in, everyone, to an installment of the Mile High Insiders. You probably are like, where's Luke and where's Thomas? Well, we're filling in for them here tonight. Hopefully, everyone had a great Wednesday. I am the substitute co host for tonight, Ron White. On that side of me is the senior draft analyst for MHH, Erick Trickel. How are you doing today, Erick?
I'm doing good. I'm excited. I mean, it's the first time that I get to jump on a show with you and talk Broncos football. I mean, obviously we got to talk Broncos football when we're at the meet and greet, but
Mhm.
it's a little bit different, and a lot has definitely changed in the Bronco verse since October.
Yes, we are going to get to, um, of course, all the drama, all the speculations here, what may happen for next season, what those implications may bring. But first, let's welcome in a few folks from the chat. We got Dylan Von Arts, one of our MHH staffers. Thank you, Dylan, for coming in as always. He says, "Sup, Broncos country. Make sure you hit that like button on the way in, share on all the platforms, and subscribe if you haven't already." Yes, guys, if you do not do anything else, make sure you do those three things. They help us right here at Broncos Country. So thank you very much for that. And then we got David Duncan coming in here. Thank you, David. He says, "Evening, Erick and Ron and Dylan and Scott. No disrespect to Stidham, but he just isn't a starting quarterback. We have to draft a quarterback, but it will depend on who wins week 18. Yes. I'm going to go through, we're going to definitely get into the Peter King article that was released today in regards to Stidham being the starter for the Denver Broncos um, next year, depending on what happens with Russ. But we want to get into a few more before we get into that. Then we got Dylan coming here as a placeholder. Yes. And then coming in, he's a bridge gap QB. Yes, he is. Um, and then David, we got some good chats here, guys. David Young's coming in and says, "All I'm saying is that the only ones that knows who will start is Sean himself." That is correct. That is correct. Um, so I guess Erick, let's get into the Peter King article that was released. And just for everyone here, I'm going to get into a few quotes of kind of what Peter King was referring to. So, per Peter King, unless Jarrett Stidham absolutely stinks it up in those last 2 weeks, so obviously last week and then this week's matchup with the Raiders, he believes that the Broncos will enter the 2024 season as him being the starting quarterback and then see what happens from there. They'll bring in someone else to pair with him. Now, again, that may not be too far fetched. My thought here, Erick, is it really depends on what they do at quarterback, specifically in the draft. I'm looking to see what happens in the draft. Now, currently they do pick 14th. And, if Sean Payton wants to get a Caleb Williams or get a Drake May or get a Jaden Daniels, he's going to have to move up. So it depends on, if that move happens, which quarterback is picked. But if they stay put or if they trade back and they grab a JJ McCarthy or Uncle Penix Jr. or even a Bo Nix, then I think with those quarterbacks, you may have to have them sit for a while, maybe behind Stidham. And obviously, we know it makes sense from a financial perspective as well if they were to have Stidham as the starter. Broncos will have to ride the Stidham if they don't get those top draft picks at quarterback, one of those prospects, as they navigate that ship on all the salary cap water, and they have to eat that $85 million in dead money from Russ contract.
Yeah, I mean that's the big thing is Jarrett Stidham for 2024. He's going to have a $7 million cap number, and when you're going to be because they're going to post June 1st cut Russell Wilson, they're not going to outright cut him and be taking on an additional $49.6 million. So they'll post June 1st cut designate him, which means they can cut him before June 1st, but they don't get the benefits of that until after June 1st. He'll still count 35.4 million against the cap this year, and the 49.6 goes down next year.
Mhm.
So that 7 million, like that's a good boost for 2024 without having to go and expend on a free agent. Now, free agent options, I mean, you have Jameis Winston, who probably is the one that you'd look at the most, maybe even bringing Teddy Bridgewater back because of the familiarity they have with Sean Payton. But the best way to circumvent the cap hit of the dead cap that you're going to be dealing with Russell Wilson is a rookie quarterback. Now, as you said, Drake May and Caleb Williams, for me, those are the only two guys I can see being starters the rookie year outside of like emergency situations.
Mhm.
So I don't think Jaden Daniels, I think that you'd still look at Jarrett Stidham starting for at least a few games, maybe half the season or so before turning it over. Michael Penix, all depends on the medicals. Maybe he comes in and earns it, but I think that ideally you're having him sit. Bo Nix, same thing. And JJ McCarthy, he's a guy that you're probably going to want to sit for a year or two because the drop back game just wasn't a large part of the offense at Michigan. And there are a lot of issues with his reads. So you want to buy him a little bit time. So it makes sense that the Broncos can have this mindset of we're fine with Jarrett Stidham being our starter next year, but I doubt it's set in stone. And as you said, it all depends on what they're going to do in the draft. I think more so than free agency.
Yep. Yep. Good point. Well, we got Kevin Gray coming in. Thank you, Kevin. Says evening Broncos country. Good evening to you as well. And Thomas Luke Scott, big mile high salute to Broncos country, Broncos for life, MHH for life. Thank you again, Kevin. And then going on to the quarterback conversation yet again, Mike Naylor comes in with a comment. Thank you, Mike, for your comment here. He says, I think we keep Stidham and draft Bo Nix at number 14. Nix checks all the boxes Peyton has, I think. What are your thoughts on Bo Nix, Erick Trickel? I know when we were at meet and greet, you you did have a few reservations, but did that bowl game change your mind, or what do you think with this?
So I said this last night when I jumped on with Carl. On the
Mhm.
season, he has almost as many passing attempts, 10 plus yards down the field, as he does under 10 yards in just the middle of the field. It's like a difference of like about 20 less passes. He checks off a lot of the boxes Sean Payton has, but not all of them. And the biggest one is he lacks the consistency to push the ball. And the
Mhm.
Oregon offense really covered that fact because of the playmakers that they had. It was a lot of screens, it was a lot of quick passes and, scheming guys open. And Bo Nix was able to capitalize on that. And good for him. Like it was a huge boost to his draft stock. He's a guy that might get drafted in the first round or second round at the very least, I think. Whereas when you go back and watch Auburn tape, where you saw him where the offense was very different from what he was running at Oregon, putting more on the quarterback, the struggles were very clear. And he was a guy that nobody would touch, maybe as an undrafted free agent. So it's good to see it. And it's good to see how you can make him work. But when I watch Sean Payton in the Broncos offense this year, when I listen to what Sean Payton has said, I think that he really wants a quarterback that can be more consistent with pushing the ball and not
Mhm.
having to play this short game so much.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed as well. I absolutely agree with you. It's a lot of that Oregon offense, a lot of horizontal throws. They're not dropping back a lot. Bo Nix is definitely not dropping back a lot to push the ball down the field. And I think there's gonna be times in Sean Payton's offense that is expected. And again, not to say that that can't happen, and Bo Nix can definitely develop, but from what I've seen so far, I don't think Bo Nix is, in my opinion, the best option
Mhm.
for Sean Payton. Now, looking at someone like Michael Penix, he's a very intriguing prospect. And, I was a little bit hesitant before that semifinal game against Texas. Watching him, you know, push that ball down the field with touch and just how he can maneuver in the pocket, I think, and go through his progressions. I think that type of quarterback is what Sean Payton is looking for. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, when I was watching the game, I tweeted out as like it was a gif of I want that, and I said as Sean Payton watching Michael Penix, his ability to push the ball. He's got one of the best deep balls of
Mhm.
quarterbacks in the last few years. It's all consistently right in the bucket. The big concern I had with him going in outside of medicals on the football field exclusively here
Mhm.
was his ability to maneuver in the pocket and extend plays with his legs. Well, we didn't really see him extend plays a whole lot. We saw him maneuver the pocket, and it was just so beautiful. It wasn't like a lot of wasted movement. It was bam, step, step, set your base, and throw. He was so quick to reset, and that's one of the great things that I saw from him that I wanted to see from him against Texas compared to what we saw for the rest of the season. Still have some concerns. There are still issues when he is, throwing on the run and having to actually escape. He's not going to be the best athlete. He's not going to test out very well, but he's not a guy that can't use his legs to extend plays or pick up yards in the running game. It's just not going to be something he does a whole lot. So there's a lot to like with Penix, but the thing that I always talk about with it, that it always comes down to, surgeries on both shoulders, both ACLs were torn. The
Yeah.
medicals with him are so extensive that you have to do a lot of work in checking out that, making sure, which there's a whole reason why we have the medical aspect of the combine where they go over all the medicals and they even have team doctors come in and check them out. Like that's where you start to get those answers. And I'm sure right after that happens, we'll start to hear either teams aren't concerned about Michael Penix's injuries, in which case watch for him to be a top 20 pick, or they're going to be concerned about his injuries and he's going to fall.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. We have David McGilrath coming in with a $2 super chat. Thank you, my man. It's always good to have you in the chat. He says hashtag 9-7. Probably 9-8. You mean here? What point taken? Yeah. So again, with the matchup against the Raiders, it would be lovely to end that losing streak to the Raiders and getting their first win at Allegiant Stadium. I know this. They're out of the playoff picture, obviously, but it's a division opponent, and the Raiders are going to come ready as well because they're wanting to end the season on a strong note. So I know Peyton mentioned that this game means a lot to him. He definitely wants to win, and we'll see how the players respond and if they can get up for this game because they also need to have that same energy, right? Of getting out there, executing, and stepping up to get this victory. But yeah, hashtag 9-8. Let's see if we can end up the season out strong.
Yeah, Papa Bear, thank you for the super chat. I hope you're feeling well. I saw the updates on Facebook of some issues. I hope everything's all good there. As for beating the Raiders, so I sat down, I went through all 496 outcomes for draft position for week 18 earlier this week. Not excluding ties because ties are stupid. But of those, the range for the Broncos to pick is 11 to 16. If they lose to the Raiders, their most likely spot to pick is 12. If they win, their most likely spot is 15. So I wrote an article on this and it was asking is losing to the Raiders worth picking 3 spots higher than beating the Raiders? Most likely. To me, it's not. When I look at this draft class, there's 8 elite prospects, I would say, and then the rest are so close together. If there was 12 elite prospects, then yeah, I would say it's not worth losing. It's not worth beating the Raiders to miss back 3 spots, bet on somebody falling. But with how tight everybody is there in that range, I don't want to lose the Raiders. I don't want to end a season on a losing note. Again, I want to go out there, beat the Raiders, end this losing streak that the Broncos have against the Raiders, get the first win in their new stadium. All this, that to me is more important for the long term of this team than picking 3 spots higher than they likely will if they lose or win. Sorry.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. We got the Ronk coming in. Thank you, Michael, for coming in. Always appreciate you in the chat, my man. He says, "Good evening, Ron and Eric on Mile High Insiders. Go Broncos." Good evening to you as well, Michael, and hope you are doing well and having a great New Year so far. Thank you for coming in. And then we got a string guy coming in here with the prospect question here for you, Eric. Eric, do you know anything about John Paddock from Illinois? Pocket guy with good arm strength.
So never watched him. So my quick thoughts that I'll fire off are basically just looking at his stats. So not at all a scouting report, just quick opinion on that. Yeah, he's probably a guy that you'll look at as a undrafted free agent, camp body, maybe practice squad guy if he does well enough. He has 27 touchdowns to 18 interceptions in his career. He was nine touchdowns to 3 interceptions for Illinois this year, throwing for a little under 1,300 yards. He has a career completion percentage of 60.1, but that is carried by a 6 attempt game or season in 2018. The last 2 years, he's completed less than 60% of his passes. So just a camp body. That's all I see in him. When I get around to actually scouting him, maybe my thoughts will change. But from a quick scouting report, training camp body.
Cool. Good. Thank you for coming in with that prospect question, string guy. Much appreciated. I want to go back up to a comment. Let me see if I can. I think it was from Mike Naylor. Let's see. Yes, thank you, Mike, for coming in, because this is something I definitely wanted to call out. The difference between Russ and Stidham. Russ can't see over the lineman in the pocket, missing wide open receivers in the middle. And you bring up a good point, Mike, and that does definitely factor into, in my opinion, the reason Sean Payton made the change and was looking for that spark on offense against the Chargers. We see not only these two things from Russ, we see Russ running into sacks. We see Russ holding on to the ball way too long. There are things in Russ's game, the deep ball is always going to be there, but they're the fundamentals, Eric, that they're seeing the field, going through the progressions, and that's missing. Now, you did see how the offense moved a little better. It was a little bit more efficient with Stidham. Now, again, Stidham isn't a world beater. Stidham isn't the guy that's going to, don't expect 4 or 5 touchdowns, but, at least he was able to kind of maneuver in the pocket, quite well, go through the progressions, the open man, finding Judy and those other folks in space. So I think that's the difference. And that's why Sean Payton, in my opinion, obviously the financials play a part, but I think it was more the performance related and those fundamentals that Russ just doesn't have, that still has. And hopefully the next quarterback, he'll get his guy, and that guy will be able to kind of, have what Sean Payton is looking for.
Yeah, I mean, Russell Wilson throughout his whole career, the concerns have always been how he doesn't attack the middle of the field. And that is a big part of what Sean Payton wants to do offensively. It's another way of helping keep the clock running without relying just on a heavy run game. And so that was definitely an issue with it. There was other performance issues. I've seen a lot of people screaming about the offensive line, but Russell Wilson leads the NFL in pressures and sacks that are on the quarterback. I can't remember how many times this season I've watched him panic in a clean pocket and then run into a defender. And
Yeah.
there was a sack in the against the Patriots, I think it was, where Mike McGlinchey had his rep 1 and Russell Wilson is 5 yards away and runs into his defender.
Right into him. Yep.
And there were multiple instances of this. And while the offensive line, I wouldn't say is top 10, I would say they're 12, 13 at the very least. They're just outside the top 10 this year. And so the issues with pass protection, a lot of that falls on Russell Wilson, issues reading pre-snaps. blitzes. I mean, the Jets gave the same look 3 times and ended up with 2 sacks, and one of them was a strip sack. Like, those issues are all the performance based. And then, yeah, the $37 million injury guarantee definitely played a part in it and was probably the factor of we're basically limited from the playoffs at this point. Well, now we're for sure going to bench you. But the performance, yeah, you can't undersell how much the performance had to do with the benching of Russell Wilson.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. All right. We got Phil McLaughlin coming in. Thank you, Phil. Always good to see you, my man. He says, "Good evening, Ron and Eric. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you as well. Hope your New Year is going well thus far." Says, assuming we pick a somewhere else in the draft, are there also any O-line draft possibilities you like? Hashtag Buckham, hashtag MH8 for life. I'll turn this one over to you, Eric. Any draft prospects from the O-line perspective?
Yes, I love this year's class on the offensive line. Nick and I in our group chat have been going back and forth about it. And I'm in the mindset, I don't care how much money they gave Mike McGlinchey. I would be fine drafting any of these tackles and letting him
Mm-hmm.
compete for the starting right tackle job or left tackle, depending on what you do with Garrett Bowles.
Mm-hmm.
Man, JC Latham out of Alabama is one. Joe Alt, although I think he'll be gone before the Broncos pick. Olu Fasciano out of Penn State. Like, dude is just such a freak of nature. There's a bunch of tackles that I think are going to be moved inside, which I'm fine with looking at that too, because Ben Powers hasn't been great this year. Hasn't been terrible either. But you could look at moving on from his contract after 2024. So that opens up the door for that. They're probably the best center declared out of Oregon. You're probably going to be looking at center. I doubt they bring Lloyd Cushenberry back due to financial reasons with, dealing with this dead cap of Russell Wilson. Taylor Guyton out of Oklahoma. He's another tackle that I would like probably. And he's a guy that I think if Denver's picking 11 to 16, they could probably trade down to the late first or even early second and still have a chance at Guyton. And I can't remember who it was. And I said this last night with Carl. It was 32 picks in the first round. And I think it was Daniel Jeremiah. It might have been Dane Brugler, Lance Line, one of them. But they're saying of the 32 picks, 4 of them are going to be quarterbacks. And of the remaining 28, 20 of them would be offensive linemen and wide receivers because those two classes are ridiculously strong. A bit of a hyperbole there, but this tackle, I mean, when I look at it, I could see around 10 offensive linemen going in the first round this year. It's just so ridiculously strong.
Yeah, and I didn't really notice the offensive tackles until these. I was watching the semis for the college playoffs. I know I was watching the Mims. I think Georgia during the bowl game, and then I think that one out of Washington. I think he can play guard as well. Troy.
Yeah, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he's a guy that probably going to be moving into guard. And there's a tackle out of Duke that will likely end up at center in the NFL.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Good question there, Phil. Thank you for coming in. Then we got Daniel Yost coming in. Thank you, Daniel. Says, good evening, Broncos country in MHH. What are your thoughts if the Broncos were able to draft a QB such as Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, or Michael Penix Jr. in the 2024 NFL draft, and why? So I guess, Daniel, I'm gonna go with my preference and why. I think that's the good way to approach this. I think, Eric, you know who my favorite is, but Caleb Williams is my favorite, guys. I'm going to be honest with you. I've talked to Eric in length at the meet and greet about Caleb Williams, just because what he can do. He can throw on the run. He can run it. He can push it down the field. He can escape just about anything. Now, of course, obviously he wasn't winning a lot of games because, the USC defense was terrible. And I know the O-line wasn't the best either, but so it was kind of, the sum of all his parts weren't there for him, but just what he can do. And you also need that quarterback in my mind to go toe to toe with a Patrick Mahomes in the division. And the athleticism of a Caleb Williams can do that for you. Now, there are some things that have to be cleaned up with Caleb Williams. Of course, there's no perfect prospect. I've seen a few bad decisions. Sometimes he doesn't get through the reads as he should. So there are a few things that I think with the coaching of Peyton can help. But, Caleb Williams, I think, would help to kind of course, with other pieces surrounding Caleb Williams, to kind of help take this team to that next level. Now, again, that's just a wish list for me. But I think as far as a perfect fit, and you don't have them listed here, Daniel, but the perfect fit for Sean Payton's offense is Drake May. I think Drake is just, what he can do, maneuvering subtly out of the pocket, in and out of the pocket, can go through his progressions and his reads, make some of the downfield throws as well. Now, under pressure is a different story. I've seen him a few times under pressure where he does get rattled and there's, some errors in the decision making, but, just the fundamentals of playing the position of football to what Sean Payton in his scheme, I think that's a perfect marriage. What do you think?
I'm with you on everything you just said. I'm trying to find a tweet real quick since you brought up the Drake May pressure stuff. And it's a good point. I mean, that is one thing when I have watched him, the pressure and throwing on the move, both of those have been hit or miss with him. So it's something that you want to see improved and grow. And so here we go. So Drake May, when he's been moved off the spot, he's thrown 60 attempts, completing 28 for 460 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. Not terrible until you look at, McCarthy, Williams, and Nix, who have, Nix and McCarthy have fewer yards, but they're at 9 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, 7 touchdowns and 1 interception, and 7 touchdowns and 1 interception. Drake May, it fits what Sean Payton wants to do, but the pressure numbers are concerning. The style of offense that they play at North Carolina is very similar to what Sean Payton does and has done throughout his career. So it'd be a seamless transition, essentially. Verbiage obviously is different. It's not a carbon copy of it, so there could be hiccups, but he makes the most sense from that point. And then Penix, same kind of issues, moving off the spot, dealing with pressure, problematic there. But Washington's offense has enough similarities that I think that he could transition easily into a Sean Payton offense. Not as many deep shots as they have at Washington, but still enough, and a little bit more middle of the field than he's done at Washington as well. So that's where the differences there lie. Those would be the two guys that I think are the best fit. But if you can land Caleb Williams and figure out a way to make him work in the scheme or and adjust your scheme around him, like I would be ecstatic for that.
Good that we're sharing a brain on that one. Got David coming in, just alluding to what you were just saying, Eric, but I'll reiterate on regards to the Penix injuries. So I was thinking Penix, he has the injuries prone, but he could rise for the Raiders, the Chiefs, the Chargers, but that's just my opinion. Yeah, David, it's again, as I said earlier, I was hesitant, and I still am because of the injuries, right? Because of the shoulders and those ACLs. It does have cause for pause, but his stock has skyrocketed, from that semifinal game. You just saw you saw a pro-ready quarterback. Again, there are a few things that he has to work on. Just how he can slide left and right and maneuver in the pocket. And again, the deep balls are with accuracy and touch, going through the progressions and finding the man in the middle of the field, which has been missing. So, those qualities, those attributes owned, and what was displayed in the semifinal, I think, he can definitely move up the charts. And some of these quarterback needy teams, we're talking about the Raiders, so if the Broncos do have, depending on kind of where it falls, but if the Broncos fall if the Broncos pick after the Raiders, they'll have to try to leapfrog them to get them. But yeah, I think Penix stock is definitely rising.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing everything he can to help himself before the medical evaluations, and that's all he can do. Everything at this point is still a couple questions he can answer on the field, but there's no questioning his football intelligence. That's been praised throughout, even before he was at Washington. His determination, his leadership, all the intangibles have been praised about. We're seeing the growth on the football field in certain areas, and there's still one game left where he can still show more growth in that department. But it all comes down to the medical checks at this point. Two ACLs, both shoulder surgeries. Like, he's doing great for college, but he hasn't been hit a whole lot, which
Hmm.
is still a concern. And the medicals can check out, and that's still a concern once you get to the NFL. Can he continue? Can his shoulders handle being hit? So it's injuries are such a injuries are such a trap. And I remember talking to this with a scout a couple years ago, because two players could have the same injuries. One of them will have the long-term issues from it, re-injuring it, and the other one will be just fine. And you never know which player is going to be which. And it's just one of the crappy things about injuries. A lot of guys get their careers ruined because of them, and you can never predict who.
Yep, tis the truth. Tis the truth. All right, let's see. We got here. Got Monica coming in. Monica Raposo coming in. Thank you. She says it's Dulcich playing. I believe playing Sunday. I believe he's out.
Yeah, today was the last day of the 21-day practice window, and they didn't activate him, so his season's done. He will
Okay.
stay on injured reserve.
Right. And then David about, I guess, going through some injuries here. Is Sutton playing, or is he still on the concussion protocol? I believe he was limited in practice. At least that's the last report I read. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm not sure yet if he's playing. We'll probably know more in the coming days, unless something's come up while we were on. But
Yeah, I'm double checking now. I believe he was limited today, which is a decent sign, because when
yeah.
for a concussion protocol, you typically want to at least be limited by Wednesday and full on Friday, at the very
Yeah.
least. So yeah, he was limited. Marvin Mims was limited as well, although he's dealing with a hamstring. So
Hmm.
positive signs, but no guarantee that either of them will be playing this weekend yet.
Right. Yes. All right. And we got William Catalano coming in. Thank you, William, for coming in. Appreciate you, my man. He says, I'm disappointed in our wide receiver room besides Sutton, and our tight end room is really bad. William, it's not good. It's not ideal. And we saw, when Sutton left that game with a concussion, how really poor it is. We're Broncos are relying on Jerry Jeudy to take that next step, but that's not happening. We see Jerry Jeudy out here still dropping passes. And the tight end, we were hoping for a Greg Dulcich, to come back and be a threat, but again, that cupboard is bare as well. So I think that's also two other position groups where the Broncos really have to look at those in the draft. Now I know quarterback is a big need. Obviously, we'll probably pick in the first round, depending on what they do. Maybe they do something in free agency, but I'm really intrigued by like a Brock Bowers in this offense. Like Brock Bowers he's like outside of Caleb Williams, I would say he's my second favorite prospect overall. Um, I watch a lot of Georgia football, everyone, and just what he can do, just how he can impact a game overall with the blocking, how Bobo schemes them open, how we can get him down the field. It's just an all around tight end. So again, the Broncos may not pick Bowers, but kind of having that tight end that can be that good blocker and good pass catcher to pair with another receiver, because I do think the Broncos need another receiver or two. Now I know they have folks coming back from injury, like I think Jalen Virgil, and then we want to obviously see Brandon Johnson, and then Mims develop with Sutton too. But having that dynamic tight end, I think that's been missing a lot this year.
Yeah, I mean, we saw a little bit of the offense and how Greg Dulcich impacted it in the first game of the Raiders. The offense was working, and I do think that we would have gotten a completely different offense over a while. I mean, over the season, if we had Greg Dulcich consistently, because they were so much was designed around him creating mismatches. So when he left that Raiders game, it was like all momentum on offense basically stopped. So tight end, outside of wide receiver, offensive line, and quarterback, Brock Bowers is my top option for the Broncos. I would love for him to be there, just because, well, he's not an outstanding blocker, but he's good enough. He's a guy that can come in. I mean, he's been good, been great, pretty good in college, but hitting the NFL level, stronger, faster. I still think he can more than hold his own, and then he can be that mismatch guy that Sean Payton loves to have from the tight end room. Adding to the wide receiver room, that's going to happen. I doubt, and there's going to be some additions by subtraction. I think that Jerry Judy's on his way out. I think Tim Patrick definitely won't be back on his current contract. He will cost about $16 million against the 2024 cap. He won't be back on that. Maybe they cut him and bring him back on something else. But you have Marvin Mims, who was a Pro Bowler. He got announced that as one of the Pro Bowl's return specialists. So congrats to the rookie. Jalen Virgil will be back. Brandon Johnson will be back. Well, he is already back, but should have more time getting after dealing with the injury he had. Cortland Sutton, I think, will still be around. And then adding somebody else to it is a must. And this is a great wide receiver class to do it. It's deep, and there is such a wide variety of skill sets in this draft class.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, William. We got RD coming in here. Thank you with a Canadian $5 super chat. He says, "What position besides QB do you think we need most?" People always say to seem to say O lineman, but I think our D line and linebackers were the weakest groups this year. Yeah, Artie, this is a great question, and I'm going to have to agree with you. I think the defensive line has not been good that much at all. I mean, we saw them just getting hammered at the point of attack. We didn't see a Zach Allen fighting Erick until kind of late in the season. So maybe having a few folks come in to work with Zach Allen, kind of be opposite of him to hold up that point of attack. But I would definitely say the defensive line has been a weak link. DJ Jones has had his moments, but again, not really showing up when needed. And then we need to look at edge too. Like, I know, again, this edge group isn't good. I think the sum of all their parts is good. They're able to generate pressure, but they don't have that elite pass rusher. And that's also something that the Broncos need to look at in the draft. But I would definitely say defensive line and the linebacking core for sure, RD, have been a weakness this year.
Defensive line, 100%. I mean, I was pounding the table for them to go and add to the defensive line room besides Zach Allen all offseason long. Even though I was excited about Eoma Awazarike taking that step in this year too, and then he gets suspended for a year, and they still don't do anything. Jonathan Harris isn't good. Mike Purcell is definitely on the last legs of his career. Matt Henningsen didn't take a step forward. DJ Jones took a significant step back. He didn't start making plays until probably about 5-6 weeks ago. And even then, it's only been maybe 2-3 plays a game. He was so terrible to start the season. Zach Allen finally came around about week 5, week 6, and just has kept getting better. But it's been a one-man show from Zach Allen. You got to get somebody else there. I mean, it became a joke with Nick and I about how often Jonathan Harris or Mike Purcell found themselves on the ground, like even by single blocks, which just you can't have. And then you have that leads to these issues that they've had against the run. So you got to find somebody on the defensive line. And as for the edge room, said it but once, I'll say it again. They don't have a Batman. They don't have that top dog in the room, and
Right.
they gotta find it. Baron Browning, he has way too many injury concerns for me at this point. He has struggled to stay on the field his whole career. I'm not comfortable with him being a Batman. He's a really good Robin. Nick Benito is a good pass rush specialist. Jonathan Cooper is a good, solid depth guy to have for all around. But Benito and Cooper and Browning, all of them have struggled consistency with getting after the quarterback. You got to have that guy that you can sit there and bet on taking over games. You got to
Yep.
have that elite pass rusher.
Yep. Yep. 100% agree. All right. Let's see. We got Phil coming in again. Thank you, Phil. Says, was nice to see Simmons, Mims, and Sertan Pro Bowl. Well, good. You guys think Sutton was left out due to missing games, or was he not worthy? I think Sutton was worthy of it. I think he the some stats, probably the yards, although he did have the touchdowns, but I think maybe the yards and couple that with him missing a few of these games may have been the reason. But Sutton has proved his worth for the Pro Bowl this year for sure. I mean, leading the team in touchdowns, it's not easy. So I would say that, maybe they're looking at it from he may not have the receiving yards plus coupled with missing some of the games is probably why he was slighted.
Yeah, I think he was worthy to an extent, but it is a significant issue when you look at Pro Bowl voting. Stats matter. It's one
Yeah.
of the reasons why I hate Pro Bowl voting. And Cortland Sutton sitting there with the 42nd most receiving yards in the NFL.
Yeah.
He has 740. Even though his touchdowns, he's tied for third, it still comes down to yards because ahead of him in touchdowns, you have Mike Evans and Tyreek Hill, both of whom are well over 1,000 yards. Tied with him, you have CeeDee Lamb, over 1,000 yards. Amon-Ra St. Brown at 9, over 1,000 yards. Jordan Addison and tight end Sam Laporta, they're both approaching 900 yards. Then Diggs, Moore, Metcalf, all over 1,000 yards. Like, yards matter. I think the missed games, and I also think the fumbles hurt Sutton
Oh
as
yeah.
well. But touchdowns, he should have been in, but it's more than just touchdowns, unfortunately. And the inconsistencies of the Broncos offense hurt Sutton.
Most definitely. All right. Let's see. RD coming in. I guess maybe about a reclamation project. Thank you, RD. He says, I'd rather Justin Fields as a random reclamation project over Howell. So again, Eric, we discussed this as well. And at the time, I floated the idea of possibly the Broncos should look into getting a Justin Fields. And I'm looking at more Chicago Bears tape, and I'm like, would this make the most sense for Broncos? Just because Justin Fields kind of taken off a bit, especially later on this year for sure. But he reminds you of a younger Russell Wilson. Now, he's just a younger Russell Wilson, guys. And again, I get it. The Chicago Bears team as a whole is not great. We saw Fields running for his life. They have okay receivers. The offensive line is just it's horrible. And then that defense bad. So the team as a whole isn't great. You kind of have to do it within the realm. But, again, looking at what, not to say Justin Fields can't develop, right? Under be a new scenery, new staff. But I think from what Peyton wants to run and how Justin Fields plays the position of quarterback in football, I don't think it's a perfect marriage, even as a project.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. Justin Fields is, with what he does on the field, he's a younger Russell Wilson. Doesn't attack the middle of the field, uses his legs to extend plays, will panic in the pocket and run into pressure. just all these things that we've talked about Russell Wilson for years, even before he was with the Broncos, they're there with Justin Fields. I highly doubt that Sean Payton wants another type of that. So guys that don't attack the middle of the field consistently, can't work on timing and rhythm routes, they're guys that I'm not really considering for the Broncos. Sean Payton, I think he wants to try to turn this team around, and in his mind, to do that, he's got to have the quarterback that can run his offense fully, and that's not Justin Fields, and I don't think that's Sam Howell either.
Yeah.
Sam Howell, I mean, everybody looks at the numbers that he's put up, and he had a pretty solid season there for the longest time. But there is like 90% of his passes are outside the hash marks. He does not attack the middle of the field, despite having all three of his big receivers actually being good middle of the field receivers. It's just not something that he did a whole lot, and wasn't consistent enough there for it. And I don't think that that's a great marriage there either.
Yeah. All righty. Let's see what other comments we got or questions. I'm gonna grab David here. David Yonkin coming in again. Thank you, my man. He says, Ron and Eric, explain why VJ will get a second term when his defense is dominant one week and sleeping the next week. Yeah, this is a very interesting topic here, David. I'm going to say one thing is going to save Vance Joseph's bacon, and that's the fact that this team had that turnaround with all of those turnovers. I think that was kind of his saving grace, because I don't have to repeat how the season started. 1-5, giving up 70 points to Miami, and it was a bad showing. But I think with that turnaround, that in-season turnaround, and kind of getting the team to somewhat believe on defense and be more aggressive may be the reason why he could possibly get a second chance. But outside of that, David, it's the talent on the defense leaves a lot to be desired. As we just talked about, the defensive line. I mean, that needs to be addressed. The linebacking group. Now, we did see Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell. They have their moments, but there's still a lot of issues with stopping the run. Even at corner, outside of Patrick Surtain, opposite of Patrick Surtain, they can use some more another body or two there. Although I love the emergence of Jaquan McMillan, but I think another body or two at corner will help. So I'm going to say the reason that he may have a second term is just because of that in-season turnaround with the turnover. But it's that defense from a talent level definitely needs to be upgraded.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree with you. The takeaway turnaround that they had, that's going to play a part in it, because that's a big thing that Vance Joseph defense have always done, is they've always been one big on taking the ball away. I think that Sean Payton and Vance Joseph both recognize how untalented this unit is, and I also think the biggest thing is, I think that Sean Payton recognizes the mistake of trying to force Vance Joseph to run, the Vic Fangio, Ejiro Evero hybrid defense that we saw last year, and that failed drastically. Vance Joseph had no clue what he was doing calling plays with that, and then he started to, go more to what he has in his toolbox, and that's when we started to see the defense do a little bit better. Still inconsistent, but I think that there's some recognition that giving Vance Joseph the time to fully install his own scheme, going and getting better talent, especially on the defensive line, adding some competition at that second corner spot with Riley Moss, I think those are a few things that are in the cards, what they'll try to do this year, and then see if this defense can't take a dramatic step forward. And I think that barring a big step forward like that, I don't think Vance Joseph will get to year 3.
Yes, definitely. All right, let's see who we have. Look at the chat here. Again, apologies, guys. Not we don't have our producer in the background, so we're going to be looking through a few here. Just here. All right, got Phil McLaughlin coming back in. Thank you, Phil. Says a couple questions. One, Eric, what is the breakdown on tight end Lumpkin? Second, how much of a difference is there between Stidham and Nucci? And three, will Peyton look at Jameis Winston? Thanks, guys. I'll take three first, and I'll let you kind of look at the first two, Eric. I think Peyton will take Jameis Winston, or take a look at him at least. Again, there's familiarity there, obviously in New Orleans. Jameis Winston can definitely execute Peyton's offense well, attacking the middle of the field, escaping the pressure, throwing the ball down the field. Interceptions for me are still a big concern, but I think Peyton's able to kind of, decrease at a minimum. But I think Jameis Winston, if he's out there, for free agency, I think that might be a possibility for Denver to kind of maybe build that bridge. Now, again, still should not preclude them from drafting a quarterback. But to kind of bridge the gap there, I think Jameis Winston is a guy that the Broncos may probably take a look at.
I can't give you any thoughts on Lumpkin outside of Brock Bowers. I have done almost nothing on tight ends. Every year about this time, I always say I'm behind, and this year I'm well behind in the scouting process. How much of a difference is there between Stidham and DiNucci? Not as big of one, in my opinion, as people think. And that's not because I think DiNucci is better than he is. It's because I don't have a very high opinion of Jarrett Stidham. And I do think, I agree with Ron. I do think that Peyton will look at Jameis Winston and at least explore it, see if he can't convince Jameis Winston to come join him in Denver on a cheaper contract than Winston might be able to get elsewhere.
Yep. All right. Then we got Daniel coming back in. Thank you, Daniel. Says Ron and Eric, what do you think of a guy such as Taysom Hill? He knows Peyton's offense. I want nothing to do with Taysom Hill. Yeah, again, the familiarity is there. We see Taysom Hill come in for a lot of those quarterback design run, a lot of those trick plays, but just as a pure quarterback, as a pocket passer, there's really not much there for me. Now, that's not to say that they won't look just because of that familiarity, but I think me personally, I don't think Hill is your guy to be that good bridge for the quarterback. I don't think that they should take a look at him, but they may explore the possibility.
Yeah, he's not a quarterback. He's a gadget player that you can, design some plays for as a quarterback, but you're going to have plays designed for him as a running back, as a fullback, as a tight end, as a wide receiver. He's a gadget player. Sean Payton found a way to make him work with decent effectiveness, but he is not a guy you want playing quarterback full time.
Yeah. All righty. Let's see here. Looking through the chat. Let's see here, guys. I'm not seeing much here. I think we can wrap it up for tonight, Eric.
I do have one question for you, talking about the
Sure.
Pro Bowl selections. Patrick Surtain, since we got the one about Cortland Sutton, Surtain, Simmons, and Mims all elected as starters and Pro Bowlers. Besides Sutton, is there anyone that you feel was a snub?
I would say I would say Jaquan McMillan slightly. I think yeah, a little bit of snub. There was a slight. I think Jaquan McMillan. Now again, I know he kind of came in later and blossomed a little late, but what he was doing was good. And that he probably should at least be considered. Quinn Miners as well as another. I see that in the chat. That's definitely a snub for sure. Quinn Miners is so good, man. It's so good to just watch him on the offensive line. Just he's so aggressive. He's such a mauler. He comes in just hold up his block. He's creating those lanes. He's just so fun to watch. So I would definitely say Quinn Miners is one. That was a snub. I thought, I think some people are coming in here now, as I mentioned, Quinn Miners is saying that he was a lock and thought he was a snub because he had tremendous play on the offensive line this year. I would say, Eric, on the offensive line, I mean, again, the weakest link on the offensive line for me this year was Mike McGlinchey. And so I would say, overall, the offensive line was solid. But if you had to pick one MVP on the offensive line for the NFL 2023 season for the Denver Broncos, is Quinn Miners.
I think that if you just look at the Broncos offense in general and had to pick one player as your offensive MVP, it's Quinn Miners. He had a rough couple games at the beginning of the season. He's been hit or miss the last couple weeks, but his body of work there in between, he was playing at an all-pro level. He was one of the best right guards in the NFL. He's definitely a snub. He's a Pro Bowl alternate, at least, though he should have been a starter. Michael Burton, the fullback, is another Pro Bowl alternate. And I'll since you brought up Jaquan McMillan, I'll fire off a quick hot take here. In my opinion, Jaquan McMillan was more deserving of a Pro Bowl than Patrick Surtain.
Yeah, you took my words out of my mouth.
And
we're sharing a brain there. I think again, this was a bit of a down year for Surtain. He didn't really, when I watched some of the games, he was letting some of these receivers, catch the ball and have the yards. I think I don't know what it is with Surtain. Hopefully he, if he stays on the Broncos roster, hopefully, I don't know how the trade thing is going to happen if they do ship him off. But hopefully next it's a better outing. But I was a little disappointed on what I saw from Surtain this year. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, it's tough because Patrick Surtain, I still think he's one of the best corners in the NFL.
For sure.
And this year, I think with everything else, the changing of the schemes, playing more zone than he's normally used to, which he struggles with a little bit. Those are a couple concerns, but when you look at the numbers of all the corners this year, he's barely top 15 in any of them. Definitely a down year for him. And name recognition definitely played a part in getting his election. But that said, glad he got selected to the Pro Bowl. Hats off to him. It's much better for him financially going forward because it changes the formula for his 5th-year option as well. Sucks on the Broncos side because they now have to commit more money to him. But congrats to him. Congrats to Justin Simmons. Congrats to Marvin Mims, Quinn Miners, and Michael Burton, all of them, for being named starters or alternates for the Pro Bowl. I mean, when you look at it, there's about 70 players who get elected to the Pro Bowl out of 2,000-ish. So hat tips for them to be one of the select few that get selected to the Pro Bowl.
Yes. Alrighty, guys. Well, and we are near the end of the show. We're just going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you guys for joining us on this Wednesday. Hopefully, again, we're not the Luke or Thomas, but hopefully we were able to, address any questions you had, talk about the Broncos, and talk about what the outlook is for the Broncos. Again, make sure if you don't do anything else, you like, subscribe, and share. It will help us very much. Any parting words, Eric, for the MHH family?
No, I hope you guys all have I'm about to say weekend, but it's Wednesday. Thrown off there for a second. Used to being Friday night. I believe Chad and Zach will be on tomorrow. Make sure you guys tune in for them for their Thursday show. Go Broncos, and can't wait to see where we pick. 11-16, that's the Broncos range. Can't pick higher, can't pick lower. And as the senior draft analyst, it'll be nice to have a confirmed number so I can really start narrowing things down, even though there's not that big of a difference between them. Hope everybody has a great week, and I will be back Friday and I believe you'll be on Saturday night again,
On
Ron.
Saturday. Yep.
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 So have a great evening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time. Go Broncos.